All right, guys. Sorry about the delay there. Tonight I have a few interesting stories for you guys. One of them dealing with the New Age takeover of the ayahuasca scene and the damage that it does, and a personal story that I have to relate about that because I think it's really important that we. I don't know what to do about it. It's really a difficult thing to try to figure out how to get rid of the gatekeepers because they're there because they have money and they own the properties, and so they're able to position themselves between the people and the shamans. And of course, I'll get into that in greater depth in a minute. And then the Noya Rao subject, which is also very interesting because there's a lot of dispute about what tree it actually is that is the real Noya Rao. And it's a quest that is really important to me because I've been interested in this plant for years, and I will tell you why in just a moment. And then what is the other topic that I had? Oh, and then the path of truth. The dieta to become a shaman that works with this Noya Rao is called the Camino de la Verdad, the path of truth. And no data. What do you mean no data? What's going on tonight, you guys? All right, I guess that was a false message. Okay, so let's start with the... what I was saying is the path of truth. Beyond what this tree does for you, it just got me thinking about what it really means to be a person that is pursuing truth. And between these stories, if you guys have questions or topics that you would like to throw out for the AMA, I will happily address those things. So do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron, and let's get into it. Guys, let me know if the audio and everything is okay. I seem to be having some kind of crazy glitches going on here. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Pisac, Peru, which is one of the sort of new age plant medicine meccas of the world. It's really kind of an unfortunate thing because these people tend to be narcissist yuppies that have abandoned their career in favor of a pseudo-shamanic path, and they really do a tremendous amount of damage. And so what happened is I was in Pisac and I found this poster that had it was an advertisement for, sorry, I'm still, an advertisement for an ayahuasca ceremony that would feature Noya Rao. And it said in the ad that we will be drinking Noya Rao tea and then we will consume the ayahuasca. And Noya Rao is an extremely rare plant teacher. It's a tree, and it's not the tree that glows. There is a fungus that attaches itself to the leaves, and then when the leaves fall, they glow on the ground, and they glow in the tree as well. But it is... The legend is that this plant can induce instantaneous enlightenment on like a Buddha level in some cases, especially if the dieta is followed. And there's a 3-month dieta you can do, or there is a 3-year dieta. If you're actually, I can't recall the name, the Shipibo word for this particular type of shaman that works with this tree, but that's what that is. And so it's very, very secretive. There's only between 4 and 8 of these trees known in the entire rainforest. And very early on in my ayahuasca experiences, I actually found myself at the base of one under quite extraordinary circumstances. The medicine forced me to go out into the jungle, and this kind of ties back into the last stream that I did about the intelligence of ayahuasca and how it seems to be able to take control of our biological processes in order to heal. In one case, the medicine told me that I had parasites and that it could flush the bugs, but it couldn't kill the eggs, and it wanted me to go into the jungle and find this plant and eat it. I refused to do that because I was still really early on in my experiences. and it was the middle of the night in the Amazon rainforest, my first trip to the jungle, and I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. But at any rate, later, I was supposed to be doing a purge and drinking guayusa and vomiting, and instead, the medicine started just going right through me, sending me to the toilet instantly, over and over again, and then it clicked that she had said, I can flush the bugs, but I cannot kill the eggs. And so here I am with this water running through me over and over and over again in an attempt to clear out these parasites. And so I believe it was this same night. I wouldn't go get the plant, but the medicine was like, no, you have to go into the jungle. You don't have to go deep into the jungle, but just go into this little clearing and just follow instructions, please. And I didn't want to do it. So suddenly I felt like I was going to crap my pants, like explosive diarrhea. And I had seconds to get off of the deck. And so I went out and I thought, well, I don't want to go into the jungle. So I'm going to go into this field and use the bathroom. And I couldn't. It cinched me up. So I could not go. And so I go out into the jungle and eventually get this done. You know, it's like the medicine would not allow me to relieve myself until I complied and went out to the jungle. And so I start receiving these instructions to stand facing this tree, and I look on the ground, and there are glowing leaves all over the ground, and I look in front of me, and I'd seen pictures of Noya Rao, and there's a Noya Rao there. And so I was pretty blown away by that, because I know how rare this tree is, and I found out actually the tree was the reason why the shaman had picked the spot. But yeah, so I'm standing at this Noya Rao, and I look up into the mist, and there's this like entity swirling down through the mist, and it has a big round head and a square eye and a regular eye. And I knew it was like Aztec or Incan sun god of some kind, but I didn't know exactly which. And I didn't find out until many years later. Driving through Sacred Valley, I saw a guy walking down the street with the face on his back, and I jumped out of the taxi and I said, "Hey, what is that on your cape?" And he's like, "It's Inti, the sun god." So if you put together the connection that I didn't know what this entity was, and this is the tree of light, and there's this solar entity that comes down out of the mist, and I hate to even admit this next part, but actually, right as this being was about to land in front of me, I was like, no, you know what? I'm done with this. It was just too much for me. You know, it was like my third experience, and I deeply regret it to this day, but I left the jungle instead of having this exchange with this entity. And so I have this fascination with light, both the science and the mysticism of it. And there's this huge solar mystery that has to do with the Elizinian mystery lineage and, you know, the Incan beliefs and all of these different cultures that are fascinated or worshipped light and gold. And so Noya Rao appealed to me profoundly because of this, you know, relationship that it has. And also just the fact that it's supposed to be so enlightening and all this. So way back in Pucallpa, probably about 8 months ago, I met a shaman named Augustine Mahua. And the Mahua are a very famous lineage of Shipibo healers, but Augustine has a reputation as a bruja. I actually have a interview with him that I am going to publish eventually. I just haven't gotten around to it. But it was his family lineage, and they are known as one of the main Noya Rao shamanic lineages. And so I see this on the poster. I know who the Mahuas are, and it wasn't Augustine. It was his nephew, I think, Darwin. And so I thought, wow, that's amazing. Let's go and do this Noya Rao ceremony with this Mahua. You know, great honor, and super excited, unfortunately. Because I noticed something was wrong almost right away. We called the lady, and I said, well, you know, I'm also a YouTuber in the plant medicine niche, and I'd love to do an interview, and I could promote, you know, his ceremonies and whatnot. And she said, okay, but, you know, you got to send us a list of questions. And there's just something about how she responded, you know, that, you know, it's very secretive, and there's only so much we can say. So I get there, and they call everyone up to have a little consultation. And she says, you know, why are you here? And you know, what is your goal for tonight? What is your intention? And the Shipibo guy is sitting beside her, And I said, well, I've been fascinated with Noya Rao, really like to work with it, and I knew there's supposed to be a dieta before you consume it. So already there's this little red flag, but I thought, it's just a tea. It's not psychoactive or toxic, so, it's definitely not going to hurt anything. And she said, oh, we're not drinking Noya Rao. And I was like, what? And she said, no, you could sign up for a dieta, and we could talk about what that would look like. And just interfacing with this woman, it was like I was talking to a lawyer's receptionist or something. Just this really phony, new agey sort of artifice, and just, way too businesslike or something. And so I was disappointed, and but the thing is, I noticed the shaman's face. When I brought up the Noya Rao, he's like, what? So it occurred to me right away that and then I asked her, I'd like to interview him about the Noya Rao, and she said, well, now, before it was okay, but now that I'm there, she says, we can't really talk much about that unless you sign up for a dieta. And now another red flag, because the 30-day or 90-day dieta, the 30-day or 90-day dieta does not give you access, make you privy to any special information. If you did the entire 3-year path of the road of the truth, to actually become a shaman working with this plant, then at that point, you would be privy to the secrets, but not, So this woman, without the shaman's knowledge, had advertised that it would be a Noya Rao ceremony in order to lure people that were interested in Noya Rao, and then try to sign them up for a dieta, and she would get a 10% commission or something for the $6,660 dieta. Now, that I knew about the price of this dieta, and that's fine for 90 days or whatever it is. But, the 6,660, light bearer and the tree of light, that seemed like quite the synchronicity to me. So I go and sit down, and this is all dawning on me right away, that this shaman didn't know what's going on, and she is luring people here under false pretenses to get them to sign up for this dieta. And I had brought 2 clients and my 80-year-old mother-in-law for her first ayahuasca ceremony, which, was a pretty big deal. And so they told us to come at 7:30. This woman starts talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, and it gets to be like 10:30 or something. And I've got my 81-year-old, mother-in-law who's supposed to be in bed at 8 o'clock normally, sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And she's going on and on and on about all this new agey garbage, the purple flame, and, Christ, invoking Christ and all this stuff. And finally, I think when she invoked Christ, I actually sat up and said out loud, I can't take any more of this anymore. I got to go right now. And I managed to take a deep breath and stay. But, let's talk about the ramifications of this. So when you're having an ayahuasca ceremony, it's very important that everyone has good feeling, that there's trust and there is, positivity between everyone. So to deceive people, it made me suspicious of the shaman too, because now I'm thinking, well, I know the Mahuas. And I did check online to make sure. I found a picture of this guy with his mom, who I know of. So I was able to confirm, this is definitely the real lineage, and his energy was incredibly good. He seemed so earnest and just sweet and, very humble. And so I felt good about him. But then when I realized how shady this woman is, I started getting suspicious of him as well. So now this woman's deception has introduced this distrust and this dissonance into this thing. And then an hour and a half of just new age bullshit, thanking every grasshopper and ant and hummingbird and direction 6 times. And it was just absolutely absurd and such a waste of time. And, in case you're thinking, what's wrong with invoking Christ consciousness? For me, that is kind of like going to a synagogue with a swastika on your arm. This is the religion of the conquerors that have come and destroyed these cultures and, you know, eradicated them physically in a lot of cases. They took the Incan holy places and they tore the tops off, and they built their cathedrals literally on top of like the Temple of the Sun and all of these places, you know. So I was absolutely mortified. But this is where the story turns around. By the way, you guys, AMA questions in the chat. These stories are only supposed to be filler between the other discussions. Okay, so we drink the medicine, which is like a half ounce, and I was thinking, this is ridiculous. There's no way this is going to have any effect, but it's very thick like syrup and very sweet, which is an interesting trick. The Shipibo only use in their ayahuasca, and this is another thing I should have known better, because I know Shipibo and they don't mix plants with ayahuasca. You know, there are separate dietas, but typically there's no mixing of plants. So drinking the Noirao and then drinking the ayahuasca was a weird proposition anyways. And one of the reasons the shaman, when I mentioned it, was like, what? We wouldn't do that. So I go up and I take the medicine, go lay down, and it is strong. It is really strong for... Yeah, man, Pitbull was there. So the medicine comes on, and it's really, really strong. And the shaman starts singing this Ikaro. And I've heard a lot of Ikaros from a lot of people, and I have never heard anything like this in my life. It was so musically technical and melodic. There were techniques being employed that don't make any rational sense. I don't know if I can explain this very well, but he would like make a pitch and then he would send these wavers through it, and it was so visceral and deep, and then it would go bluesy, and then these insane rhythms where there would be like a triplet high notes in like a blues kind of melody, and then it would drop down low and there would be a syncopation against that, and then another melody would come out from, I mean, it was absolutely staggering. And this dude was like 4'11", you know, maybe 28 years old or something. And his voice was deafening. I mean, when he would go into falsettos and do that weird wavering thing and all of this stuff, but then he would just belt, and it was like deafening, incredible. And I really regret this, but I don't feel right about recording during ayahuasca ceremonies. I had my camera, and I was thinking, man, you should get it out. And I was actually, the medicine was strong enough that when I was kind of looking around for it and I couldn't figure it out, like, where did I put the camera? And I thought, well, I didn't ask, so I shouldn't turn it on. And then later, when I told him that Ikaro is the best I've ever heard, the opening one, he's like, oh, did you record it? And I was like, oh, no. And he's like, you didn't record it? And he was all mad. That bummed me out, man, that he actually would have wanted me to record it, because he knew, I think, that he did especially well. You know, I think even for him that was like a high point, because he was really excited at the possibility that I recorded it. So he comes over and sits in front of my mother-in-law, and he's singing for like 20 minutes, personal Ikaro for like 20 minutes. Just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it actually started to worry me, because I thought, you know, she's 80 years old and he's spending this much time, you know, maybe he's concerned or something. And later, my mother-in-law actually told me that there was like this being that was kind of inviting her to come through these bars, and she knew it was the other side. And when I heard that, I thought, man, it's possible that if you had agreed to go, you might have stayed, you know, by choice. I really believe that kind of thing is possible with ayahuasca, especially at that age. But, you know, I think the big combination of the Ikaro and just, you know, the fact that she wasn't ready for that yet, she made the decision to join us back here in this world. And so when he came to me, he starts singing Bobansana Ikaro, and Bobansana is like my ally plant. You know, I do mix it with ayahuasca, and I, you know, consume Bobansana a lot. It's actually the only plant that I've really done a dieta with, although it wasn't formal. You know, I ate very basically ayahuasca diet and consumed Bobansana all the time for maybe 8 months. Yeah, go ahead, hit the questions up in the chat. Asunderworld for sure. So he comes over and he starts singing this Bobansana Ikaro to me, which completely blew my mind. And then when he was done, he just sat there and stared at me for a while. And I was like, what's going on? And then he says, your energy is very rich and powerful, and tu dieta es muy derecha. And that one took me a second your diet is very right. I had a hard time, but I think what was meant is that in the same way we have the left-hand path and the right-hand path, and it's the same in the jungles of Borneo, in the mystery temples, it's all the same. I think that's what the reference was. But then he invited me to come and sing the Icaros to the rest of the people with him. And I had just vomited my guts out, and I was sick, and I just could not. He was trying to give me the words in Shipibo to get started with him, but that was a tremendous honor that he invited me to sing the Icaros to the people with him. I really regret that I didn't have the physical presence to. What's up with gestures and clowns? Is this anything shamans deal with? Yeah, we can talk about that. So at any rate, long story short, he spoke about secret tobacco used during a trip. Yeah, I can talk about that as well. And why did this weird thing just pop up on my... So at any rate, we're going to invite him, Darwin, the shaman, to our event in May. It's not 100% that he'll come, but I'm pretty sure he'll do it. We actually spent some time after the ceremony kind of chatting and playing. He told me how why the Shipibo ayahuasca is so easy to drink and so sweet. And the trick is just that they only use yellow vine and chacruna, and when you cook it down to almost a paste, there are sugars in the vine that are concentrated, and so it is infinitely easier to drink than the stuff that I make with red and black vine. Difference in the different types of trichocereous plants like scope bridge. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we're going to invite him, and I'm super excited about that. I mean, when you hear these Icaros from someone like that, I really don't think, I can do it to an extent if I'm take strong medicine and really feeling clear and present, and, I can get in there fairly well and make these things happen. It's actually quite a remarkable experience when the medicine teaches you these songs, because it will, I'll just tell you the story of the first time that I experienced this, actually. I was working with this shaman actually right where that Noya Rao tree was, and he had noticed that I had only drank ayahuasca a few times, but I was providing assistance to people that were falling apart that he had drank with 100 times, because he has the same group of people he's always working with. And I would also drink twice as much and still have the capacity to help other people. And he started doing things like this girl started kind of crying and not losing it, but having a hard time. And instead of helping her, he grabbed her boyfriend and left me with her. And at first I was like, what the hell did he do? And then I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to do it. So I performed sort of a cleansing. And when I was done, she didn't know I was doing anything. I was just sitting and kind of absorbing the bad energy from her and releasing it. And after the third time, she sat up and thanked me and wiped the tears out of her eyes. And so the shaman comes back and sits down, and he says, you're becoming a shaman, but you have to learn to sing these songs. And so just let these sounds come. And he gave me a couple of what the Shuar called syllables, I guess. I mean, that's his word for it. It's not really quite right, but, his English is only so good. And anyways, he gave me a couple of the sounds that you use to kind of get into the space, and they're actually supposedly the sounds that created the universe. The Shuar have an almost identical creation mythos to the Hebrews, the tribe of Judea, where these letters or sounds were the fundamental building blocks of the universe in the beginning of time. And so I start to do this, and the medicine starts moving muscles in my neck that I didn't know existed, like out to the side and in directions I didn't know were possible, and shifting my, the muscles around my organs. And these were all muscles that I had never felt move before in my life. And the sounds that were coming out of my mouth were blowing my mind. It really is an incredible thing. But what I'm getting at here is that the way that Darwin was singing, I don't think if you don't have 1,000-year lineage, you're not going to not like that. I mean, you'd have to hear it to believe it, but it is truly extraordinary. So let me get to some of these questions. Okay, Brandon asks, what's up with the jesters and clowns? Is this anything shamans deal with? Shamans deal with all kinds of stuff. I have never made up my mind about what exactly these entities are, whether or not they are objectively real or not. And I would say that they're real, but they're not real in the same way that the IRS is real. They are like something that is produced by the vector that is created when our consciousness interfaces with the universal mind. That's how I think of it. And the jesters are generally in the first or second layer. So when you consume DMT, whether it's ayahuasca or an N-DMT, also 5-MeO DMT, the jesters are the only ones you see, from what I understand, with 5-MeO DMT. And because they exist on the outer layer of the visual experience, I don't know if I'm explaining that well, the fact that 5-MeO isn't very visual kind of supports this theory, that this consciousness space is gradiated. And so there's the waiting room, which is usually just pulsating orange and red blobs and geometries, and it's really chaotic and doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's actually pretty uncomfortable to get stuck there for a prolonged period. So the waiting room, kind of unpleasant, and just beyond the waiting room, there are the first, almost like gargoyles, the what people call the jesters, and they're often flipping people off, and they're just kind of rude and weird. They're not necessarily evil, but they're just kind of trickster nut jobs. You know, they're just bizarre, but they seem to inhabit the very first layer where there are entities. And then beyond that, there is more rich color and things like mantises and the mechanical bees and all of these other entities exist. Beyond that, though, I don't have a good answer for you, and I don't think anyone does, you know. Why it is that there are denizens that exist at different layers or different doses of DMT could be spectral, right? Or because it's on a spectrum. So, you know, there's this realm that the jesters exist in, and it's kind of an archetypal layer of consciousness. And then beyond that, there are other layers. And the interesting thing about the archetypal correlation is that the type of information that you receive from these entities at these different layers is generally consistent. So the jesters oftentimes are there to tell people not to take things so seriously. That's a really common message from them. You know, that's why they flip you off, like, lighten up, buddy. You know, it's a rude way of communicating that, but that's what they're saying. Don't take yourself too seriously. So I don't really know how much more there is that's meaningful that I could add to that. The mantises often do brain surgery, which is odd, and I also have received information that was true that no one could possibly have known from the mantises. In one case, the vision was disappearing, like a cloud closing, and the mantis stuck its head out of the vision cloud and said, you know, this person sent you this exact amount of money. The vision disappeared. My phone beeped, and it was that person. I hadn't asked for money. I hadn't sent out distress signals. She'd never done it before. So, you know, pretty remarkable. And also, I think the deeper you're able to go in and maintain your focus, the more of that type of information you're able to extract. So that's all we'll have to say about that, I guess. So let's see here. What's next? Asunder World. On a recent broadcast, I think you spoke about how sacred tobacco can be used to lock in moments during a trip. Can you speak more about that? Yeah, and tobacco can also bring people out of psychosis. I suspect that particularly Mapacho tobacco could be used to treat schizophrenia because of this. Rape is another great way to do this. But in the Shuar tradition that I was taught, the tobacco is taken before the intention is set for the ceremony because it has the effect of tightening and focusing the mind. And, you know, on a mechanistic level, what's happening there is that the, thought and I guess, magic or prayer. The mechanism behind it is electromagnetism. And so the way I think about it, it's like if you have a wide beam on a laser, it's not very focused. If you focus the laser, it becomes capable of cutting through, metal. And so you use the tobacco in order to bring this prayer or this intention into concision, into direct focus. And in these types of traditions, whether you're talking about the Western mystery tradition or the Shuar practice of shamanism, when you're praying, you're not sending your hopes and dreams off to some potentially imaginary sky god where it's just going to be gunpowder lost in the void. You direct your will at the object that you wish to have an effect on, right? So it's very important that your mind is focused so that you have the ability to create that influence. And another thing that tobacco can be used for during ceremony is that if you start to become overwhelmed or confused, you lose your focus, you take the tobacco, usually you'll purge, and you will feel clear and clean and good again. Also, if you have had some sort of revelation or insight and you want to retain that, you can take a little bit of tobacco. We take it in a liquid form through the nose, always made from Nicotiana rustica, which, by the way, also contains harmalas. It's the only tobacco species that does, which are the compounds that are found in the Banisteriopsis copy vine and Syrian rue. And so if you want to make sure that you retain that information, you can take some tobacco, and then I use the fourfold breath pranayama. Which allows you to, God damn it. Which allows you to inundate the brain with oxygen, which is a fuel it needs to build itself. And then when you are breathing out and when you are keeping the breath distended, you're focusing on feelings that are associated with the opposite of the thing that you're trying to retain. So the things that you need to release in order to maintain or to integrate this new protocol for your life. So that's also why we take it at the end of ceremony as well, so that all of the things that you've experienced, this feeling that you have of being clear and clean and good, is imprinted, because it tightens tightens everything up and allows you to sort of coagulate the new neural pathways and retain the information better. Have I noticed a difference in the different type of trichoceros plants like Scope Bridge? Yeah, I mean, I've only had a few different types of San Pedro, but yeah, there are definitely differences. And the reason is in, Western speak or whatever, the entourage effect. So you have mescaline, but then you have a whole host of other alkaloids, phenethylamines, mostly, that sculpt it and give it subtle differences. And so the Ecuadorian cactus that I drank, I'm not really even sure, I think it was Echinopsis, I don't know, whatever the common one is in the Andes of Ecuador, it tasted worse than the cactus here, the Peruvian torch, and it lingered on your tongue for way longer. It just, like, once you drink it, you have that taste throughout your entire body for hours. And it was much more rough. And also blackouts are common at higher doses. And the cactus here is stronger, but it's also more gentle. The taste is much more mild. It doesn't linger on your tongue as much. And the information that you get is a little bit different. It's not as dark, in my experience. So yeah, there are differences, but I have not had enough experience with, dozens of different types of cactus to really answer that well. Let's see. Can I speak about divination? Is it legitimate? Is there a practice to achieve it in combination with sacred medicines? You know, that's an interesting question, and this sort of thing is extremely dangerous to mess around with because we started this out talking about the New Age influence and how destructive it is. And one of the reasons for that is that our culture does not have the respect for the office of the shaman or the magician. People kind of think that they can just, learn that channeling exists, for example, and then go and do it and trust the information that they're receiving, trust their ability to identify the source of it. Well, these people often believe also in negative entities and parasitical entities and all of these kind of things, but they're so arrogant that they believe they can easily distinguish between an angel of light and Satan coming as an angel of light. And in the mystery tradition and in the shamanic tradition, it takes years and years and years and years of not only developing your experiential palette with these kind of experiences, but you also have to develop your intellect, your willpower, your objectivity, your ability to remain detached from the outcome. And so most people do not have the skill set to engage in these kind of practices safely. Whether they're real or not, you probably shouldn't be worried about that. In fact, if you need these things in order to shine light on your path, you're probably not ready to employ them. Having said all that, though, there is absolutely no doubt in my life that I have received precognitions that are absolutely accurate. I've received information about a star system one time that it included astrophysical details on ayahuasca that hadn't been published yet until 10 days after the ceremony, so there's no way anyone knew it, except the Dogon had this information already. So yeah, it's definitely something that happens, and I often, when this comes up, make this reference to Fear Inoculum by Tool, the title track from their last album, which was about a pandemic that caused people to be afraid of each other, and it sowed all this fear and dissonance, social and cultural dissonance. And when Maynard, the singer, was asked about that, because it's not the first time he's done that, it came out right before the pandemic. And this is something that I had already kind of felt for myself, is that these precognitions are generally a matter of the pattern recognition system in the subconscious mind mapping out patterns that it's receiving and extending them into the future. And, everything that happens in the universe is laid out in Fibonacci. And people think that applies to seashells and universes, but it extends across all systems, including history. Like right now, we are experiencing a psychedelic renaissance. He's dropped out, but there was a Kennedy running for president. There was all this racial tension in the United States, war breaking out. It's exactly the same as the early 1960s, even down to, until a couple of weeks ago, one of the presidential candidates has the same name. And then there's a supposed attempted assassination that was probably shady. The details are varied, but the underlying pattern is fundamentally the same. And so, that allows me actually to make a lot of predictions that are accurate in regards to macro developments, things that are happening in the society at large. And so for me, I would say, I guess, that actual divinatory practices, which is not what the tarot is for, by the way, they do work, but they work because laws of the universe are exerting themselves on all systems. And these patterns are going to express in everything because of that. So, I really think about it in almost a deterministic sense more than like, we're getting information from spirits or whatever. You can think about it how you like, but that's my take on it. So as far as preparing yourself to be able to do this, it's all the typical stuff, meditation and plant medicine and occult practices and all of this kind of stuff. But the thing that people tend to neglect is intellectual development. The more you can learn about physics and chemistry and philosophy and all of these other things, the more you are going to be adept at navigating these other more metaphysical spaces. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron where you can access 6 years now of premium content that is not available. In fact, speaking of New Age charlatans, I just made a new video. I don't know if I can put it on YouTube because of copyright stuff, so it may be only in my patron area. It's a little bit late putting it out, but it's a debunk of both Billy Carson and Professor Dave, which was really quite a surprise to me. But I'll give you an example of one of the debunks of Professor Dave. At one point, Carson says something about how, there's an electromagnetic field that can be used or manipulated in order to cause changes in the genetics. And Professor Dave says, no, there's no electromagnetic field that can cause complex changes in proteins and amino acids, compel them to do things. And I'm like, oh, really? And then I play a interview with Michael Levin where he says, we have discovered that this electromagnetic field can be used to manipulate proteins and complex proteins. Exactly what Professor Dave said couldn't happen. And it's from 2013. So it's not even new, and then he proceeds to show proof of this with these flatworms that apparently live forever. And anyways, really interesting stuff. May only be available to my patrons, so head over there and join. Also, I have some private spaces for November if you want to come to the Sacred Valley and drink medicine and run around in the ruins with me for a week or a month or whatever it is, November 15th until December 15th. And then also in May, we're going to be in Manu in the jungle, and that one is going to fill. So if you want to join us, you had better get your deposit in, or you are not going to be able to because we keep our groups very small. All right, next question. The diversified farmer says colonialism is only to do with the crown. I don't think that's true. The crown comes over, and then all these people basically do the crown's will. These people are magicians, and they impose their will upon entire nations through their constituents. So, it is colonialism. It is colonialism that, we have taken over, that new agey, shitty people have taken over the ayahuasca scene, for example, because, I think there's a correlation between how much money they have and how shitty they are. So they own the properties, they have the malokas, they can pay the shamans, and then they become these sort of gatekeepers that, I couldn't get an interview with this Mahua because this woman is intervening, because she is in control, because she has the money. Luckily for me, I can just send his mother an email and I know his uncle, so it didn't really stop me. But it sucks, it definitely sucks. Yeah, Brigisi, simulation theory. The thing about simulation theory, I think, is that who cares? Because it doesn't tell us anything, Clearly, this universe is not just a bunch of random gobbledygook that has been, the lightning hit a puddle and now there's organisms or whatever that's obviously stupid. There's way more going on with it than that. I don't really believe in God, Brendan, so I don't know how to answer that. Is it colonialism or God's willpower? So I don't think it's... and anyways, I don't see why God, if God exists, would be decimating beautiful cultures and replacing them with this boring, bland, vapid, colonial fucking Catholicism. You know what I mean? These cultures were awesome, and still are. A lot of them. One of the things I like about the Sacred Valley is that a lot of the Quechua subgroups, have retained a lot of their culture. There's parades all the time and big celebrations for, but they're all in honor of these virgins and whatnot. Now they've all been Catholicized. Point being, to me, if there's a God, the creation, the point of it is to surprise and delight itself. In the same way that our objective is self-realization and self-knowledge through exploration, the universe is doing the same thing, and we are the sensory organs for that process, right? So, to replace vibrant, amazing, magical cultures with this monotheistic, monotonous, soul-sucking bullshit does not seem very godlike. That seems something more like the devil would do. Oh, but simulation theory. Let's see. Did I play? The reason I don't care is that even if we find out we're in a simulation, it's just Fabergé eggs. Who made the simulation and then who made them? So it doesn't really answer any questions. I mean, it might answer a layer, but I'm more interested in like the ultimate answers of the ultimate questions. So simulation theory to me, it's like, okay, so it's a simulation. If I shoot you in the stomach right now, it's gonna hurt like hell. It's not gonna feel like a simulation. It's real enough. So it's not really something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I have noticed some Mandela effect type things that actually seem legitimate. And like I was saying, obviously there's more to the universe than just a bunch of random gobbledygook. But what that is, Robert Anton Wilson once said life is like a game of chess, but the player on the other side is hidden from us. So whether it's a computer simulation or some sort of biological simulation, it definitely is something in the realm of a dream, and once you liberate your mind from certain constraints, you start to experience things that reveal the fact that there's more to it. And that seems to kind of suggest something more along the lines of a spiritual reality than a digital one. So I don't know if that is a sufficient answer, but it's the answer that I'm going to give. What are your thoughts on the stoned ape theory and the rapid evolution of orangutans? Actually, there was recent evidence. I don't remember what was in the article, but there were studies done recently that suggested that the stoned ape theory is viable. And, as far as accelerating evolution goes, I have never seen any other catalyst that can compete with psychedelics. I did a talk on X the other day, as Space, which is actually really great. You guys should follow me on X if you're not already, because these are kind of like big giant group conversations. So they're really interesting and fun. And so, what are we talking about? Okay. So no other catalyst to personal evolution. And so collective evolution is derivative of personal evolution on some level, right? So, when I see people come to me for, a retreat or really all throughout my life and just from observations of, the culture at large, the individuals that took psychedelics like Timothy Leary and Terence McKenna, they are, miles beyond the people that have not taken these substances, assuming that it's done in the right context and the right reasons, and there's a sufficient level of intelligence to work with in the first place. Like Terence McKenna said, psychedelics don't really work on stupid people. There has to be a prima materia that's capable of the changes in order to transmute the lead of everyday bullshit into the gold of higher consciousness. So, basically, long story short, my observations suggest that since there doesn't seem to be any other catalyst that is as effective, and that the changes that I see enacted in people in a matter of days in a single dose of some compound that totally transform them and change the way they're going to interact with people and, nature and everything for the rest of their lives, and also the fact that the brain changes that are caused by these compounds, the enhanced neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, enhanced memory, enhanced intelligence, I mean, if someone changes their behavior for the better, what would you say? They're being smarter, right? So I think that all of the evidence suggests that's absolutely a viable possibility, that the changes that well, and then he asked about the evolution of orangutans. I don't think they've been eating mushrooms. But I think that the evolution of consciousness is it's all intertwined, right? We have entrainment, which, if something cycles, lower cycles are going to try to catch up with it, and eventually they will. And then closely related species, I would imagine, are more closely intertwined. And so I would say that human evolution is accelerating, that all evolution is probably accelerating. That because if you think about this, the universe is said to be expanding faster than light, right? That implies acceleration. So if space and time and everything is all connected, the fact that the universe is physically expanding at an accelerating rate suggests to me that all the processes within that are accelerating. In fact, the experience that we have that time is speeding up could be connected to this accelerated expansion of the universe. So lots of possibilities there. What's your thoughts, Stone to Ape? Can you give an opinion on space and whether we actually go there? Yeah, we actually go there. I did watch some the old moon videos, and they did the way they were hopping around. It looked so fake and stupid. It's unbelievable. It really does just look incredibly fake and dumb. But the thing that you have to remember is that when a conspiracy requires too many conspirators, it is invalidated. There's no way. So, the whole space is fake thing, I think, is completely stupid. You can buy a telescope. You don't have to trust the government. You can tell that these objects are nearer or farther because you can change the fucking telescope. You know what I mean? And you can see that. So the whole space is fake thing, I think, is just completely dumb. And, whether or not we actually sent people to the moon or not, the jury's out on that as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it definitely does not seem like something that would be beyond our technological capacity to do. However, those videos look super, super stupid. And then there's also, isn't it Buzz Aldrin that has said all these weird things about how they didn't really go, and he just seemed really guilty at a lot of the press conferences and stuff. I mean, it definitely is one of those conspiracy theories that I think is potentially viable. I just realized I haven't even looked at the other chat for questions, so let me see. Shout out to Fear Inoculum. I met the same entities patterns on shrooms and changa at different times. How is that possible? Both trips were done at different times. How long have I been transgender? Since the womb, I guess. Okay, so that's an interesting question about the entities. It could be because they're real. If we send people to Egypt and they go to Giza and one of them points out in the desert and says, "What do you see there?" And everyone says there's these gigantic pyramids. Then we say, okay, collective consensus, there are pyramids there. So when you smoke DMT and you take a certain dose and people consistently encounter these gestures, or you go deeper into another level and it uncovers, whatever other entities, and you take mushrooms and you see them again. Psilocybin is 5-phosphoryloxy dimethyltryptamine, I think, and DMT is N-dimethyltryptamine. It's a very similar molecule. So the way that I think these things work is that we have a filtration system in our nervous system that screens out most of reality. We perceive less than 1% of the full spectrum of light. And so this reducing valve turns it down. And different psychedelics affect different bandwidths. So there's overlap, the patterns that you see of color ribbons hanging in the air when you take LSD are very similar to the ones that you see if you smoke 5-MeO-DMT, because they're actually there. So, that's my guess about that. Also, if you have taken DMT, at least in my experience, my partner also agrees with this, especially ayahuasca, mushrooms are never the same. They become more like ayahuasca or more like DMT in your experience. So it may be that because you have had ayahuasca or DMT in the past, now when you take mushrooms, it takes you into that realm instead of whatever more peripheral area the mushrooms did before you took DMT or ayahuasca. Do shamans mess with chakras? You know, this is another one of those colonialism kind of problems. It references to these things are made now by indigenous people. The third eye seems to have been a known concept with some of the tribes in South America. It's very, very difficult, though, to tell at this point whether these things have been introduced or whether they are authentically, endogenous ideas or perceptions. So, I think that the idea of chakras comes up in general, but to my knowledge, there aren't really shamanic traditions that specifically recognize each of the chakras traditionally. This is more of something that's been introduced to the tradition from the outside. Although, you do take plants that are intended to work with the mental, with the heart, to receive songs in the wind, to regulate your sexual energy, and to deal with physical things in Malkut or the feet. So I guess the answer is yes and no, as far as that goes. Okay, and then what is my other subject that here looks very interesting. Insights, neuropsychedelic filters. Is there a filter to prevent panic and confusion? Yes, it's called courage. I mean, that's kind of a different thing than the filtration system in the nervous system. But there are plants that help to develop clarity, and there are plants that help to reduce the possibility that you will ever, or toad venom even, bufo, that you will ever experience anxiety again. Psychedelics, particularly it seems bufotenine or 5-MeO-DMT and ketamine, do something to the brain that perhaps it's because of the dissociative nature, removing the consciousness from its microcosm and giving it a broader overview, an eagle's eye view. And so all of the petty influences in your life seem smaller because now you have been introduced into this ultimate reality. I was even thinking about taking a few puffs of bufo on the stream tonight and then relaying what happens because people have been asking. Oh, yeah, well, exactly. I think what he's talking about actually is that, the reason for the filter in the first place is that, we would be overwhelmed. And I think that's definitely true. If you take a large dose of psilocybin and the patterns are shifting and things are morphing and, you know what I mean, your depth perception's all weird, you're not going to be able to hunt a deer, drive a car, or do any of these practical things. And so the filtration system in the nervous system is there to reduce the sensory input into something manageable. So should we talk about the path of truth, shrooms, and copy vine experiences? People have kind of abandoned that because it's kind of dangerous, I guess. It's okay to take mushrooms and, the next day even drink ayahuasca or vice versa. But I think I've heard a lot of negative experiences from taking ayahuasca. There are harmalas in the mushrooms already. To an extent, and that's one of the reasons there are different effects from different strains of mushrooms is because the entourage effect is different. There are different, ratios of harmalas and psilocybin and psilocin and baeocystin. But I don't recommend making ayahuasca. It sounds like very often it is extremely unpleasant, and considering how few people take it relative to ayahuasca, there have been too many deaths. So... okay, so there's one more subject. The questions seem to be slowing, and I have a little bit more time. And this is totally off subject in a way, but here's a question. Have you worked or worshipped any deities? No, I would never worship anything. In my view, there was a, consciousness that was kind of a general consciousness, probably a very low level awareness, just a very basic awareness that was the substance of the universe in the beginning. And through a process of replication by means of reflection, it complexified. And that process of becoming more complex is reflected in the universal mind. So what we think of as God would be the end product of the creation process, right? That this universal mind becomes more sophisticated as creation becomes more sophisticated. It's a reactive thing. And I kind of see it as like cells in a hand. You know, this cell is not any higher than that cell in the hierarchy. So our will is equal to that of the Most High God. There's no prostrating yourself on the ground when you pray. There's no groveling before a great spirit. That whole idea of a hierarchical spiritual system, I think, is a huge problem. Also, I think in the ancient systems, people understood they were allegories. And one of the great tricks of the archons, and I don't mean the spirits that people think the archons are, the archons were actually Roman magistrates that infiltrated the mysteries in order to corrupt and, what is it called when the cop takes your car? Commandeer these powerful spiritual truths and turn them into weapons against humanity, basically. Kind of lost my train of thought there, honestly, but yeah, basically, the idea is that we are all sovereign, and there's nothing to worship. There is no God where I am. There's just a almost infinitely integrated consciousness that we are all a part of and an expression of. But no, I don't worship anything. Okay, so is this actually live? Yes, this is actually live. How would I be answering questions if it wasn't live? So, and unless I get some other questions, I'm going to move on to this final topic. Feel free to keep asking questions, but I just want to mention this because it was triggered in my mind when I wrote Noya Rao, and I thought the path of truth. This is something that I think people are having a tremendous amount of difficulty finding for themselves. And the reason is that the media, the propaganda machine, the political entities are creating all these snares and traps. And so let's say you escape from the mainstream narrative, and then you find some alternative narrative, and you get into another box, and you're just still wrong, and you're still out of your mind, and you're not doing anything for yourself or anyone else. Hawaiian Baby Woodrose or Morning Glory. I'll get to that in a second. So, in light of all this, one of the things that got me thinking about it, you just scroll through X and you just see all of this indoctrination. People are either completely indoctrinated into some left-wing narrative or right-wing narrative, and they're just completely trapped. And it's so bad that you can't even really tell who are the actual propaganda outlets and who are people that have just they're just sheep, and they're just repeating all this stuff and regurgitating all the nonsense that's being, flushed into their systems from the proverbial toilet from hell. So I just wanted to mention this, the two-party political system in the United States has one primary function, two, really. The president is a puppet that is a scapegoat because people generally only perceive things relative to their level of intelligence, right? So they're basically projecting onto the world their level of understanding and bringing everything into a frame that is based on that, right? So one of the jobs of the president is kind of like the scarecrow, right? Was he the one that didn't have a brain? Yeah, I think he's the one that didn't have a brain, right? So the Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, these absolutely ridiculous puppets that are just completely out of their minds. They're moronic, they're always like this, all of their puppets, right? And that is because people generally will not explain with malignance what can be dismissed with stupidity or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't think I quite had that correct, but you know what I'm getting at. And so the job is of these people to make people perceive that it's just a bunch of bumbling bureaucracy and people that are out of touch. And, the reality is, for example, that the sociological and cultural problems, economic problems in the United States. There are, if you look up the top 10 countries for happiness, healthcare, education, and you want to fix things in the United States, copy, paste, apply in the United States. It really is that simple, and the government has these massive organizations like the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. They have access to all these think tanks. They have access to Ivy League institutions, to extract all this information, compile data. The real truth about the best political and economic system is available at the touch of a button to all of the elites. They already know what it is, and it could easily be applied. And the only reason it's not is because it doesn't serve their purposes. It serves yours, right? So, I just wanted to take a second to offer to people, you really have to find the courage and the determination to perceive these things as they are and completely free yourself from the mind-forged manacles of your cult, your culture, because it really is just getting to be a shitstorm of lunacy. And I'm going to leave this goddamn planet if it doesn't get it together. So what is your view on Hawaiian Baby Woodrose or Morning Glory? Kind of toxic compared to LSD. People, it's really difficult to get the dosage correct. You can't extract the LSA and put it in capsules and take it. But, I hear headaches, vomiting, overwhelming experiences. It just, what's the point? You can order 1P LSD or ALD 52, get, pro drugs for LSD. You take them and then they're converted into LSD in the body. There's just no reason to mess with these things that are really uncomfortable, kind of unpredictable, and generally unpleasant. I have been using Rape for a while now, but my nose eventually gets blocked, and I am blocked it pretty bad overnight and cannot sleep over the next couple of days. It eventually gets better. How often is too much before it can start damaging the nose and smell? Someone had an ayahuasca vision of Trump at an ayahuasca ceremony. There is an absolutely wonderful AI video of Donald Trump drinking ayahuasca and actually becoming a shaman and starting a hippie commune. It was one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but it was really great. Okay, so he's asking about Rape. Something interesting that I've learned about Rape over the years is that the way that you can tell which Rape you need at any given time is how sick it makes you. Generally, the first time you take Rape, you'll have the strongest reaction because it has moved something through the body that is now gone. And so, I've administered Rape for the first time to a few dozen people at least, and every single time that someone vomits and they have this like really intense experience, the next time it doesn't happen. And it's not a matter of tolerance because it could be a month later. It's just that it pushes something through. And if you are doing Rape and it's blocking up your nose, you're either doing too much or your Rape sucks, because I take Rape almost every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day if I'm doing medicine work, and I do not ever have that problem. The Rapes that I am using, I know like this one here is from Gesaleu, who is the absolute world's greatest maestro of Rape. And so I know the sources. I know that they're really from Brazilian tribes or from Gesaleu himself. And, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. How much is too much? You shouldn't be taking it multiple times a day unless you're doing medicine work. There's no reason for that. Anything that you're doing that is habitual, you probably need to rein in and not do anymore. It really is that simple. And then you need to ask yourself why you're doing this Rape, why you're taking it all the time. What does it do for you? And then once you have that information, look for alternative ways to get the same results. If you are taking Rape to clear your mind on a regular basis, try meditating more, yeah, that's really the best advice I can give on that. And as far as it damaging your nose and smell, that actually doesn't happen according to according to studies that have been done. It doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't really erode the nose or anything. It's pretty harmless. It's good medicine, but you got to treat it with respect and not take it all the time. Fine dust grind tobacco. Yeah, there's a video actually of me making Rape with one of the original lineages. They claim to be the originators of it, period. The Huni Kuin. tribe, one of the Pahe, which is their word for shaman. I was invited to a rape making circle. And so if you want to see how that's done, you can find it on my channel somewhere. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron because I'm demonetized and I do not get any support from Babylon. Veterans Cannabis Advocacy Group, difference from Ecuador, how the retreats changed. Well, it's just a completely different energy here. My original intention for this last month, for example, that we just wrapped up was that we were going to focus on San Pedro, but the people had emotional and psychological issues to correct that were better suited to ayahuasca, really. And also, one person in particular was not really, he had taken methadone for a really long time, and I think his brain was not really receiving things properly, and so it took forever to get anywhere. And we ended up kind of focusing on ayahuasca much more than San Pedro at the end of the day. But, the difference here is that we were kind of treating this more like an adventure retreat, where we're going out a lot and we're going to ruins and we would go to restaurants and go to the cities and stuff. And it was not as intensely focused on, medicine and the way it is in the jungle. So in May, when we go back to the jungle, it's going to be like, once we're there, we're there, and the entire focus is medicine and medicinal plants and that kind of work. And except for there will be an excursion. I mean, of course, we'll take daily hikes and stuff around out into the jungle, but, not really going to towns and restaurants and going to see sights and stuff like we did here. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very different energy and a different kind of focus here. In fact, next month in November, it's mushroom season, so we're going to be going out and collecting morels in the forest and also looking for other medicinal and edible mushroom species. Well, he's asking about the rape blocking his nose. I don't know what you mean by, but after 30 minutes generally gets blocked. You shouldn't be holding it for 30 minutes, 10 minutes max. You don't need it 5 or 10 minutes, then you can blow your nose. So that's probably part of the problem if you're leaving it in there that long. If you raise your vibration, does that mean your low points get lower? It can. It definitely can. This is one of the most interesting questions in the realm of metaphysics to me, because if opposites generate each other, which is basically the premise of the whole Western occult tradition, then every time you save a life, someone dies as a direct, it's not exactly a result, but it's sort of an exchange. And so anytime anything good happens, something bad happens as a direct consequence. And this isn't just the Western mysteries. The Buddha talked about this. The St. John of the Cross mentioned it. So this is why, in the Western mystery tradition and in the shamanic tradition, particularly the Shipibo, there's hierarchical systems. And they're not hierarchical in the way that the military is hierarchical, but there are checks and balances in place to make sure that people are advancing in step with their capacity to receive greater power and more knowledge, right? And it is true that optimally, the true prophets' heads will rise above the heavens and their feet will walk below the hills. The true illumination, from my point of view, is not this new agey kind of love and light thing, because that's marketable. That is engineered to sell, to appeal to people. The reality is that it is the true goal of illumination, according to Aleister Crowley, for example, is to become like he in whom suffering and glory are indistinguishable, meaning that the universal mind is here to experience everything, good and bad, from all perspectives with complete objectivity. And so, that is the ultimate goal, to create this completely expansive, godlike perception of the entirety of the possible experiences. So, this is kind of that's a deep question to really get into, and there's no way that I can just offer you something that is going to allow you to navigate these spaces without making the kind of mistakes that you're talking about, getting bounced up too high and falling too low. There are ways to balance the process, and a lot of that has to do with ego and humility and objectivity. And also your willingness to do work and not be a theosophist or a new age or an armchair magician, and to actually, develop a broad palette of skills and intellectual disciplines that are all employed to your advantage. Otherwise, yes, what you're kind of alluding to there will be a problem for you. The hill and valley experience of the mystic, they call it. He's asking about kratom. I actually take kratom all the time, and it's not the best thing, but I have had chronic fatigue syndrome since I was 20 years old, and it led to all kinds of opiate abuse and other types of problems. And, if you keep it under a certain amount, about 10 grams a day, the withdrawals won't be too bad when you stop, and it will not really cause you any significant problems. If you take too much of it, it leads to rage episodes and memory loss and cognitive, like fog. So, it's definitely something not to take casually. If you really need it, it's much better than taking any pharmaceutical or when next retreat's planned. I'm only doing 2 more ever. Unless something goes terribly wrong with a certain situation that is finally kind of shaking itself out. November 15th through December 15th, and then May 1st through the end of the month. The November is going to be in the Sacred Valley, and May will be in Manu in the rainforest. It's the best part of the jungle, I think, anywhere. All the animals are intact. There's plenty of jaguar and capybara, monkeys and macaws and it's absolutely magical. So, but that's it. And we're already almost full for that. So we have a couple of people that are kind of, saying, oh, I'm definitely coming, but they haven't made their deposits. And so first come, first serve. Whoever gets their deposits in first will be attending. So is there any more final last minute questions before I check off? I have a client call to do in a bit. And don't forget that I do consultations for people in all sorts of categories. Something like a life coach, I hate to call it that, flow state lifestyle. The idea is that when we think of flow state, we think of it as something we do in micro, like we're playing the guitar, we're improvising. In my case, that's what would be happening. And then something kind of takes over, and you enter into this transcendental state of mind, and there are all sorts of developmental advantages that are incurred from this exposure to this greater mind. And so somebody asked me, I guess, how it is that I dialed in so well to all of this stuff. Basically, and I realized that I had planted flow state triggers and macro in my life, that, I was always focused on one thing, that I took a lot of risks, that all of this stuff. So instead of doing these things on an instrument or on a BMX bike, I was doing it in my life at large. So I teach people how to do that and resolve all their traumas and, anything else that I can, guitar lessons and other types of guidance, ritual magic and whatnot. Which would be your favorite psychedelic to do magic rituals on? Ayahuasca pretty much is a magical ritual the entire time. I often talk about how I'm not 100% objectively convinced of the existence of these spirits, but when I go into the ayahuasca space, I am totally, they're real, and that's how I interface with it. And as far as just enhancing my capacity to do any kind of work, LSD actually is the best, because the low body load and mostly the body load thing, that's really distracting if you're trying to do stuff. So I think about 100 micrograms of LSD is the best. How to make deposit, link or site. Send me an email in the description. There are emails, and then it's either PayPal, bank transfer, or Zelle if you have an American bank account. We had some problems with our website and just never bothered to make another one. Actually, I think she has it almost finished, so there will be a website again. But have you experienced entities on mescaline? Sort of. not in the same way that ayahuasca and DMT will present them, but it certainly in the sense of a presence that seems to be able to communicate. And I actually saw, I don't know what to call it. It was like her, I don't know, some aspect of her soul or something. My partner that flew out of her and went outside of the tent and was like giggling and stuff. And she was aware of it as well. Which was really strange. That was the strangest thing I've ever. But we used to drink way too much San Pedro. We would go up on her dad's mountain, and drink, huge amounts, and really, we're really out there. And on one occasion, she was just kind of being bratty and antagonistic, and it got on my nerves. And like she was like yawning and stuff, and I mean things are like melting. I'm like, why is she acting like she's bored? What is this? And it was this process she was going through, but it got under my skin a little bit. And so when you're in this kind of space, you're supposed to be careful what comes out of your mouth in terms of like certain names. And I knew that if I uttered this name, that there would be a response. And I also knew that it was kind of an overreaction to her brattiness. And as soon as I did this, the air went cold, and there were a bunch of cows like near the tent, and they all started running. They panicked so badly. I could see they're tripping over their own legs, trying to like get, you know what I mean? They're trying to get away faster than they can physically. And these cords ripped through the air, and they stuck in the ground, and one of them passed right by my neck, and I swear I could see it rip through the leaves in the bush. And I was like, under the impression that if I touched one, I would die. And as soon as I thought that, this voice said, I could turn you off like nothing. And I started to kind of beg and plead with it, like not to hurt Narika. And it was like, stop fucking groveling, because it's like an amplification of your energy and your being and your soul on a more powerful and bigger level. This is like the father energy, in God mode. And eventually, after some dialogue, it kind of disappeared, but both of us perceived it as having been present, and the cows too. I mean, they all ran for their lives. And the crazy thing is, about a week after that, I got on this shuttle to go to Cuenca, and one of the most well-known San Pedro shamans in Ecuador sat down next to me. We started talking, and he told me the story about being up on a mountain and the exact, almost every last detail of what happened to me. And I perceived it as being like the father aspect of the universal mind. He thought it was the mountain spirit, the spirit of the mountain that he was interacting with. I don't know which of us was correct, but that was a hell of an experience. Okay, so I am definitely running out of time. If I see one more question, but I only have 20 minutes until my client calls. So, all right. In that case, thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, become a patron if you want me to continue doing this. This YouTube doesn't like me. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Hope to see some of you that I know some of you guys have been wanting to come to the retreats for years, and now you have 2 more chances. And I really hope some of you guys that have been wanting to do this, people have said like it's like a bucket list thing, and that's really amazing to hear, that it would mean that much to people. And, we have like an 85% recidivism rate. Almost everyone comes back at least twice. Some people are on their 3rd event. So it's really worked out well for the people that have come. And I would really like to get this. Everyone just signed up, and we're going to the jungle to start really planning and scouting for. There's 30 different tribes, and many of whom are barely contacted and don't really like contact with the outside world in Manu. So I'm going to do my best to corral a couple of those shamans, get them to come and be guests at the retreat. So we need to physically be there. So I think we're only going to spend until December here in Sacred Valley, and then we're headed to Manu. Fish says, I really want to drink with Juanita. I'm planning to invite her. We're going to see. We're trying to get Darwin, Mahua, Juanita, and whoever I can find locally that is, probably Ashaninka. There are a lot of Ashaninka, and they're really, like up there with the Shipibo in terms of their knowledge of the jungle plants and everything. So kind of what I have my sights on. Any effects or the solar thing going on? Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty busy with the retreat and really sick for the last couple of weeks, so I haven't had as much time to like follow the solar activity and try to plan. Should have done more of that at the retreat, but as far as like technical information and like, the mysticism of it, uncovering more about that, that's definitely been happening. A few months ago, I discovered that the Inca almost definitely knew about the electromagnetic field, and they actually used meteorites during ceremony to concentrate it in order to manage the energy in the room and whatnot. Something I'm still working on getting more understanding of. And speaking of that, I think they're called Chumpi stones. Chumpi stones, they are, someone asked about the chakras, and I didn't use them at the retreat. I don't know why, but you place them on certain chakra points in order to basically harmonize the electromagnetic field of the individual with the macro field of the universal mind. So that is something I'm trying to arrange. These Quero, who are a tribe that pretty much disappeared up into the 18, 19, 20,000 foot level of the Andes, 500 years ago or more, and they have just made contact again with the outside world because we fulfilled all these prophetical things that signal a time of catastrophe, and so they were coming down to warn us, and they are the ones that really know what's up with these little meteors they call Chumpi stones. And so I will definitely keep you guys posted as I gather more information. Is it raining over there? Not until November. But anyways, you guys, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you again. We have a voice chat, by the way, for my patrons in Discord. If you are a patron at the $10 tier and higher, then you can join the private Discord rooms. So good night, folks.